What would you do if you had superhuman abilities? Would you use it for the greater good? As normal humans, it might be easy for us to instinctively think that we would only do good with our powers. But what if those powers get the better of us? Our story begins years ago, in a car ride back in 1975. 8-year-old Jean Grey is on the backseat, with her mom at the wheel and her dad in the passenger side. She wants to change the radio channel, but her mom really wants to finish the song on that station. Being the kid that she is, she gets a bit upset, and that emotion manifests in her psionic powers activating, causing the radio to switch channels. She begins to whisper quiet, almost beyond her control, and this immediately triggers her mother to fall asleep, causing their car to swerve and crash against a truck on the opposite side of the road. Miraculously, Jean is unscathed. As the car crashes and spins and inevitably lands on the concrete, an invisible force field surrounds her, protecting her from the tiniest scratch. Her parents aren't so lucky, and she later wakes up in the hospital, orphaned and alone. But not for long. Professor Charles Xavier comes by to visit her. He tells her that, like her, he too is different. Like her, he is also gifted with certain abilities. He tells her about a school he runs that is specially made for young kids like her, who are special. She is hesitant, thinking that she would inevitably ruin things again, or worse, destroy everything. But he simply assures her that he would be there for her, despite it all. She asks if this place will fix her, to which he reassuringly responds that they do not need to. She is not broken. Fast forward to 1992, 8 years after the attack by Apocalypse, and humans and mutants now live in a different kind of world. Mutants, most particularly the X-Men, are now treated with relative respect, which they were not given before. The X-Men in particular are revered as heroes, and we see that title come into play now, as the whole world watches the space shuttle Endeavour make its flight. As it reaches outer space, however, something goes wrong. It hits a solar flare and is critically damaged, endangering the astronauts aboard. With that, the President of the United States calls upon the X-Men. Charles deploys his elite team, composed of foster sister Raven and Aurora, otherwise known as Storm. There's the ultra-smart beast boy Hank, the guy with laser eyes, Scott, the guy with super speed, Peter, the guy that can teleport, Kurt, and of course, our very own mysterious and hesitant Jean Grey. The team makes quick work of rescuing the crew before the solar flare hits the ship again, but they tell the X-Men that their captain is still inside the ship. Raven tries to tell Xavier on the ground that they are pulling back, because it is only a matter of seconds before the flare hits, but Xavier insists that they leave no one behind. He confidently tells her that Jean is able to hold the ship. The problem is that she needs to be inside of it. Kurt then teleports her back there to hold down the ship, while he takes care of rescuing the captain. But sadly, even with how fast he is still too late, as he is unable to teleport to her before the flare hits the ship. In horror, the X-Men watch as the solar flare ravages the ship. But all of a sudden, from the rubble, they see Jean floating around. Kurt rescues her and returns her to them. And to everyone's shock, she's all right. With the Endeavour astronauts and the X-Men team safe from harm, they all return to Earth, where they are greeted by adoring fans. Once home, Charles and the rest of the students welcome them warmly. Charles has Hank give Jean a standard medical checkup, and in the meantime, Raven goes to speak to Charles in his office. Despite the love of the crowd, Raven is furious. She tells Charles that he put the entire X-Men in danger for the sake of saving humans. She asks him why he would resort to doing such a thing. She begins accusing him of letting his ego get in the way, especially with all the awards and recognitions they are getting for risking their lives, for people that tried to drive them to extinction. Charles simply rebuts that their heroism is a small price to pay so that they aren't constantly being hunted down by humans. Raven is still furious and storms off. Meanwhile, Hank is looking into Jean's vitals. Jean accidentally reads his mind and learns that she is actually more than just fine. Her powers have been amplified to the point where the machine can no longer read them. Seeing nothing wrong with Jean, Hank sends her on her way. With the success of the mission, Charles lets the kids party. During this party, we see Jean a tad bit too thirsty, as she starts downing a lot of drinks one by one. Meanwhile, inside the facility, we see Hank and Raven monitoring the kids. Raven tells Hank about what happened with her and Charles, and she asks him whether they should just leave. She wants protection for the mutants, and frankly, she doesn't really feel that they are a priority anymore, not after today's events. As they have this conversation though, the thermal camera starts alerting them. Jean is overheating. At the party, we see Jean get disoriented all of a sudden, and as her boyfriend Scott tries to calm her down, she loses control of her powers, causing an explosion in the middle of the party which knocks everyone back. She passes out and is taken back to the X-Mansion afterwards. With Jean asleep, it is revealed that Charles hasn't been truthful with her. Not entirely. Turns out, he made the decision to block out the full memory of the accident in her mind to protect her from the trauma. But more alarmingly, he lied about her father being deceased. He is very much alive, and by some mysterious force, she can hear him. When she regains consciousness again, she is livid. Charles admits that he put mental barriers there to protect her, but she is having none of it. Jean leaves the mansion and heads back to her family home, despite Charles saying that nothing good awaits her there. But Jean doesn't care. Charles, the man who adopted her and became her father, lied to her, and all she really wants now is the truth. So, she heads to their family home, and is surprised to find that it is all almost the same. But her father, the man that she hasn't seen in so long, isn't entirely excited to see her. Her father tries to welcome her in, and inside, she is surprised to find that he doesn't have any photos of her on the walls, or anywhere, for that matter. She soon realizes that her father never went looking for her, even after all these years. Suddenly, her powers start to manifest very, very slowly. The walls shake, and her father tries to tell her to remain calm, but she just isn't having it. She reveals to him that she has the ability to read minds, so he consciously remembers the day of the fateful accident years ago. He shows her how Jean actually rendered her mother unconscious, thus causing her to perish in the accident. Meanwhile, he survived, and so did Jean. His wife was really the most important person in the world for him, so he resented Jean after what happened. It got to a point where, when Charles paid a visit, he relinquished custody of her and gave her away. Outside, the X-Men finally arrive, after Jean has been missing for hours. Charles tries to get Jean to come back as the rest of the team prepare to subdue her, but she gets angry. But more importantly, she gets angry at Charles for lying to her. Raven tries to calm her down, but it's no use. She starts attacking all of them, one by one, including the police officers that her own father calls on her. The X-Men still try to defuse the situation, however, and Raven, having known Jean for a long time, tries to calm her down. For a movement, we are hopeful. It seems to work, but all of a sudden, Jean gets angry, and her powers throw Raven back, impaling her against a broken fence, ending her life in the process. As Hank goes to her, Jean realizes the weight of what she's done, and flees the scene. With Raven gone and the rest of the X-Men injured, the relationship between mutants and humans become callous again. Meanwhile, the X-Men bury Raven's body in the mansion. As Hank drinks away his grief in the kitchen where Charles first found Raven looking for food all those years ago, Charles tries to talk to him, but he is furious. He blames Charles, and tells him that he was wrong for what he did to Jean, for putting those memory blockers inside her head. Hank tries to make Charles apologize, but he just won't. Instead, he insists that all he wanted is the best for Jean, but clearly, they both have very, very different views on what that really means. Angry that Charles won't admit his faults, Hank leaves. Meanwhile, we see Jean. As the X-Men are burying her, she is trying to wipe away the blood on her clothes as she soaks in the rain. She is slowly realizing that she has no control and she is frightened. She heads over to Genosha, a sanctuary headed by Eric, otherwise known as Magneto, Charles's old friend turned rival. Eric turned Genosha into a refuge designed to protect mutants, much like the X-Mansion. Eric speaks with her privately and tries to get information. He notices the blood on her shirt and questions her about it, but she refuses to answer him. Their conversation is cut short immediately by the arrival of the military. Jean stays back inside Eric's house as he goes out to meet them. Given his dark history with the authorities, and with humans in general, he tries to argue with them, saying that they have no right to be in Genosha. It's their homeland, rightfully awarded to them by the government. The US military has no business being there, but the commander of the team simply tells him that they aren't there for them. They are there for Jean. He then reveals that Jean is a fugitive, who has done awful things to the police officers that tried to subdue her, a fact that Eric was unaware of, given the island's isolation. With the military refusing to leave, Jean herself greets them outside. Instead of peacefully giving herself up, she uses her amplified abilities to manipulate a helicopter, causing it to tip over, almost harming human and mutants alike. As she tries to do the same to the other one, Eric acts quickly and tries to hold it back, but he visibly struggles. Eric screams for the military men to get inside the chopper and leave immediately, before she murders them too, and the men fall back, narrowly missing a gruesome end at the hands of Jean. With the officers gone, Eric banishes Jean from the island. She protests, saying that he is supposed to protect mutants. He tells her that he is protecting them from the biggest threat to their lives, which right now is her. Heartbroken at the abandonment, she flies off. We later find her disguised as an old man, drinking at a bar where news of her attacks are being broadcasted. As she drinks, she is approached by an elegant, sharp young woman who can see right through her disguise. Knowing full well that her abilities are unmatched, Jean is surprised. Turns out, the woman isn't like the other people. In fact, she's not human nor mutant at all. A few days ago, a shape-shifting alien race landed on Earth in search of this powerful source that now inhabits Jean's body, and she is one of them. This being, named Vuk, takes her to a mansion, where she encounters more of the beings like her, called the Dabari. There, Vuk reveals that the solar flare that hit her a while back was no solar flare after all. It is a powerful cosmic energy entity, the kind that once helped in creating the universe, and the kind that destroyed the Dabari's home planet. The surviving beings of their planet now dedicate themselves to the search for this power. It has destroyed everything it has ever encountered, except for her. They were there when Jean absorbed the power, and now they are here on Earth to try and bring it back, so they may wield it to create a new world. Jean is, understandably, taken aback by this. Of all the people, why did the power choose her? Vuk tells her it's because she's special, and she is there to help her control it. Meanwhile, back with the X-Men, Hank has left the X-Mansion and gone straight to Genosha to meet with Eric. He has given up on Charles's mission, and now wants vengeance. Eric is surprised to find him there alone, but Hank fills him in on Raven's demise. Given Eric and Raven's romantic history, this fuels his desire for revenge. Now Eric wants Jean gone too, and luckily for them, Eric's team has eyes everywhere, and they manage to track down Jean's whereabouts to a place in New York. Back at the X-Mansion, Charles hears the conversation take place using his powers. With the help of the remaining X-Men, they all teleport to the place where Eric, Hank, and the rest of their crew are heading. Charles tries reasoning with them, but the discussion simply ends in a furious battle. Mutants are now fighting their fellow mutants, in an attempt to either thwart or protect Jean, who is inside the building with Vuk. All around them in the busy streets of New York, humans are all afraid, as both parties wreak havoc everywhere, endangering many civilian lives, and destroying everything around them in the process. This is only further amplified by Eric's personal vendetta. Using his power to control magnetic fields, he uproots a subway train from beneath the ground and throws it beyond the doors of the apartment building, effectively sealing the exit. Inside the building, Eric declares his intent to end Jean right then and there, but as Jean is empowered by Vuk's words and revelations, she simply deflects his attacks like they are nothing. She then uses her powers to summon him, and almost crush his head with his helmet, before throwing him beyond the building. Charles sees this, and asks help from his fellow X-Men to assist. After rescuing Kurt from the grasp of another psychic, Charles orders him to take them both inside the building. There, Jean immediately knocks out Kurt and drags him outside, taking away the disabled Charles's only chance of escape. Charles tries to negotiate with her, reason with her, but she is too far gone. She is furious and powerful, and now she knows the truth, or at least part of it. As Charles tells her that she can do anything that she puts her mind into, a line that has never failed to encourage her before, she taunts him, ordering him to walk. Charles is flabbergasted. She knows he can't walk, not even with his psychic abilities. While using her powers, she drags him out of his wheelchair, which she promptly destroys. Painfully so, she forces him to walk up the stairs and stand before her. As she slowly starts to destroy him, Charles tells her that he cannot read her mind, but she can read his. He urges her to look within and find the truth that she really wants. So, she looks. She learns that Charles didn't just lie to her for no reason. He really did lie to protect her. Her father wanted nothing to do with her and believed that she was a lost cause, but Charles insisted that as long as someone believed in her, she could do amazing things. Charles really did take her in out of the honest belief that she could control her powers one day and be a force for good. After seeing this, she becomes remorseful of everything she has done in her rage and lets Charles go. She realizes she wants nothing to do with the power that chose her. She wants it out of her system, and of course, Vuk is there to take it from her. She willingly gives it all up. But as she does, Charles hears Vuk say that she intends to use this power to wipe out humanity and destroy their world. Alarmed by this revelation, Charles screams for Jean to let go, but she can't. Just in time, however, her boyfriend Scott bursts in through the walls. Outside, the military has come to intervene in the commotion, and are busy subduing all the fighting mutants. But luckily, he is able to rush in just in time. Using his laser vision, he blasts Vuk away from her, and they all try to make a run for it. But unfortunately, the FBI capture them too. The military loads them all onto a train, heading to a facility where mutants who they deem a danger to humankind will be kept indefinitely. To add insult to injury, while the X-Men are chained to their seats on the train with a power-suppressing collar on, one of the soldiers even berates Kurt, saying that his son used to be a fan, but because of their action, he isn't anymore. With all of them captured and on their way to be caged, Charles then takes this opportunity to apologize to Hank for his mistakes. He tells him that he should not have kept the truth from her for so long. Charles admits all of this to Hank and reminds all of them that despite Jean's uncontrollable powers, she is still Jean. She is still the girl they all know and love. She just needs a little bit of help. Scott is there too, and he reminds both Hank and Eric that their beloved Raven would not have wanted them to murder Jean. This warm moment, however, is rudely and violently interrupted by an attack from Vuk and the rest of the Dabari. With their alien strength and seemingly regenerative abilities, they easily outnumber and outpower the soldiers, even with all of their artillery. As this commotion rages on, the mutants are still chained to their seats. Kurt begs the soldiers to set them free, all they want to do is help. The rest of the mutants chime in, saying that they need them to defeat the Dabari. Once these aliens reach their car, this becomes all too clear for the soldiers, as the creatures destroy them easily, one by one. At the very last second, one soldier, the very man that insulted Kurt earlier, decides to set them all free. Kurt tries to save him before the Dabari gets to him, but he is too late, and the man passes away in his arms. Meanwhile, the X-Men and Eric's faction join forces to fight their common enemy, now busy trying to cut their way through to Jean's sleeping body at the very back of the train. Scott and Charles beat them to it, but Charles struggles to wake Jean up, especially since he can no longer see into her mind. As Charles tries his very best to wake Jean up, and with Scott trying to cover them, the rest of the mutants make quick work of the rest of Debari attacking the train. By working together and combining their powers, the mutants are able to subdue the Debari, all except Vuk. Since she already absorbed some of the power inside of Jean, she is no match for them. Despite the mutants' best efforts, one by one, they are subdued by her, until finally, she gets to the back of the car, where Jean is still lying motionless. Desperate, Charles shouts for her to wake up, and as he does, he hears a voice in his head. It is Jean's. All of a sudden, he is younger again, and so is she. He takes this opportunity to apologize to the inner child he hurt with his lies, and Jean, now understanding the full reason why he did what he did all those years ago, decides to forgive him. After all, he wasn't lying about one thing, he really was just trying to shield her from the trauma, even if it meant pushing down the pain of it all. Now that she's forgiven Charles, she knows what to do. She needs to protect her family. Just as Vuk is about to take Jean, she wakes up and frees herself from her bonds. Using her powers, she shields the rest of the mutants and destroys the train that they're in, landing them all in a clearing somewhere. But this doesn't end the rest of the Debari, much less Vuk. One by one, they emerge from the woods, and with a newfound sense of assurance and control, Jean strikes them all down, using her powers to disintegrate all of them. Finally, Vuk emerges from the trees as well. She sprints full speed towards her and puts a hand on Jean's neck. At first, she's smug as she tries to absorb the rest of the power from Jean, but she soon realizes that it is all too much for her. She tries to pull away in pain, but Jean takes her hand back and forces her to absorb all of the power. After all, it's what she wanted, right? In a pure poetic rage, Jean takes full control of the power and decides to willingly transfer it to Vuk in an effort to eliminate her. The power emerges from them like ribbons, and all of a sudden, Scott yelps in pain. The action is beginning to disintegrate him too. Knowing that she can't unfurl the full force of the power to destroy Vuk without harming the innocent people around her, she takes Vuk by the throat, and they ascend into space. There, she reabsorbs all of the cosmic energy she gave to Vuk, and they explode, destroying Vuk and seemingly herself as well, leaving a brilliant bright light in the sky as she does. On the ground, the rest of the mutants look on in awe, understanding that Jean sacrificed for her family. A while later, the X-Men return to New York to continue on with the lives they have so bravely fought for. Everyone is still carrying scars from their difficult journey, but all feels right again. We see Scott holding a plaque in his hand as he heads towards the front gate. He hangs it up, and we see that their beloved school, their home, is now renamed Jean Grey School for Gifted Youngsters. Hank, one of the remaining few of the first class of Xavier's School for Gifted Youngsters, is now made dean of this renewed institution. And Charles, well, Charles has had enough of teaching. In his retirement, he moves to Paris. While outside, he is met by none other than his old friend and rival, Eric, who requests they play a game of chess. Over the chessboard, Eric offers him a new home where can slot right in, much like Charles did for him all those years ago. And as the two old friends enjoy a game of chess, we pan out and see a flaming phoenix up in the sky.